and they were walking beams installing this mezzanine floor, and they take their lanyards off? Oh my gosh. I said, well, what is going on? And they said, my superintendent says, well, one of them tripped on their lanyard and decided that it was worse than useless. A bigger hazard than, than not wearing it. So they decided to take them off. Okay, Mr. Project Manager. Okay, now you got to show your stuff, right? What you gonna do? We got flesh involved here, right? People. It's not easy. It's not on a formula. Yeah.
Buy retractable lanyards so they can trip on.
Okay. In this particular case, you've got to start asking questions, right? You got to find out, well, why did they trip on it? And he said exactly that. Well, the blowing lanyard's too long. And I said, okay, well, so why don't we buy new lanyards, right? I got to have the authority to do that. I got to be willing to do it. I say, well, first thing I got to get on my horse and get down to the project center because I got to see what's going on and resolve this thing, right? And while I'm going, I'm saying, okay, stand down and let's talk about why this is going on. I don't want anybody out there while we're figuring it out, right? At risk. And I got to start asking questions. Why did he trip? Okay? And you might ask, why isn't he wearing a hard hat, right? I mean, we got real people here. We don't want him not wearing a hard hat when we're not looking, right? Only put it on as the project manager walks by. We want them to buy into this safety culture, right? So we don't have to watch them every minute. Okay, so how are you going to get somebody that doesn't want to wear the hard hat to want to wear the hard hat? Yeah.
Sorry for my voice. Talking consistently about other accidents that are happening. I know that on a daily basis, before work started, like at the planning meetings, they were during up to 5 minutes, not just safety hazards on our job, but other things that were happening in the New York City area. So when an iron worker died by falling off a bridge, or when things happen, like somebody had a major accident, went to the hospital and broke their foot, they talked about it, and it was like a really big reality to the foreman. They were like, wow, this stuff is happening, and they have to recover their crews. And so then you can see like, wow, tomorrow I might not wake up and have like be with my family anymore. So it's a good way to process like risking their job.
Okay. Yeah.
Another way of going about it is asking why they want to pick up their hard hat. And maybe they are just, that's their way of saying they're too hot and they need like more water breaks or like a shade time. And so if they see you providing that, they'll want to wear their hard hat more.
Absolutely. Okay. We got to do it, don't we? We got to figure out the root cause of why this is happening. If they don't understand the risk involved, you got to make it graphic, right? I mean, they got to see it. They got to believe it's going to happen. It's a matter of time if we don't deal with these things appropriately, right? I mean, how much, at a rate falling from 10 feet, how much does a bolt weigh? Effectively as a dynamic load against a hard hat versus the static load. I mean, all that's calculable, isn't it? And there are charts that we can bring out. There are videos we can get. We can, enliven these people with an understanding of where the hazards are, why they're there, why we do what we do to prevent them, can't we? Okay? And avoid most of that. And we see it, and part of what happens initially, when people first arrive on the job site, it's the young ones, but it's not just young ones, but it is the young ones, okay, that don't understand what the real hazards are that we got to be particularly mindful of, don't we? So we get them inculcated into the culture. So we get them to understand and to buy into and consistently look for ways, means, reasons why they need to do the safety maintenance, right? Okay, so that's real important to do. Okay, do the statistics help us? You know, what's been our record? You walk onto a job site, first thing I want to know, how's it been going? Pretty much in this country, people are scared enough about going to jail that they pretty much don't lie on what they have to submit to OSHA. Okay? We're scared of them enough with enough people going to jail that usually those statistics that get reported are accurate. Okay? Now they may not tell the whole tale, but they do tell something and we ought to pay attention to them, right? Not the least of which reason is that our clients are going to pay attention to them. Okay? Particularly in the heavy industries, if you don't have a stellar safety record, you don't get invited to do a proposal, right? Okay, so it's incredibly important from a financial standpoint as well as from a humanity standpoint, right? Okay, there's another big issue. What gets reported? How does a manager know what's going on that isn't reported to OSHA? Because it, it was near miss. It hit right there, and it never hurt a darn soul, right? Does he have to tell? Doesn't have to tell. Should tell, but doesn't tell. Why not? Because the safety culture doesn't support it. What do I mean by that? Why would someone not report a near miss? Yeah.
It can slow down your production even though you didn't do anything wrong, technically.
Yeah. Okay. What should be the reaction to a near miss? Yeah.
It's just a warning of what's going to happen if you don't change anything.
Absolutely. I mean, we got a gaping hole somewhere in our process, in our governance, in our training, in something. There is a gaping hole waiting for something to really hit. And the only thing that happened, that the reason why it didn't hit us, is that we indeed, it was chance that enabled us to escape, right? So is there any difference that we ought to pay to what happens in a near miss than what happens if we actually had an injury? Do we behave any differently? I mean, we're talking, okay, we got a pause here. We got a big hole in our safety culture somewhere, something's happening, right? And we've got to figure out what it is, so stop work. We're going to figure it out before we go forward, right? That's productivity loss, right? Do I want to be responsible for that? Okay, see how we have to overcome that? We got to go through root cause analysis. We got to figure out why it happened, how we let it happen. Now there's a big word in there that's a key to getting that safety culture. What is it? We, right? If we start, or the culture is that as soon as we figure out something's wrong, we start looking for a scapegoat, right? Somebody to point the finger at and say, you didn't do your job. If that's our first reaction out of the bag, then who's going to report? Nobody's going to report, right? Okay, so how we deal with this is a critical issue, isn't it? That we look at it and we say, how did we let this happen? Right? And after we go through that process, we start asking the questions, okay? Usually about 95% of the time, and we'll provide some root cause analyses for you to go through and explore and so forth as we go through this section of the class. you're going to find that there, most of the time, you will find an organizational reason for why it happened. On occasion, you're going to find somebody, okay, one of the laborers or foremen didn't do what they should have done. But usually it's a procedural thing. Usually it's an organizational thing. We didn't perceive that there would be a problem here, and we didn't create a safety plan to deal with it. Okay? Another example. We had an international shipping container with steel coming from China. And the shipping container was composed of angles, steel angles, and the steel was inside of this framework of steel angles. And we have been offloading these and building our project with it for many months. Well, a laborer, or what was he? He was a steel worker. He had cut, the framework had angles across the top and three angles down each side, okay? And he went out and he cut the angles off the bottom of the shipping container, the frame, okay, on both sides. And then he was standing next to the load as the forklift lifted the frame off of the bundle of steel that was sitting there. Well, one of the beams on that bundle of steel was not, when it had been erected, or put in the shipping container, not erected, it had been loaded on top of another steel beam off-center. Okay, so you've got a steel beam here, and it's sitting on top of a, how did that work? Okay, it was sitting on top of another beam here, and this beam had a gusset on the top of it, like that. And there was another beam sitting beside it here. Okay, and so it was loaded like that. And the frame was going around the outside of this container, okay? And so he cut the angle that was holding this unit on. He cut it right here with a torch and cut it over here, and then they pulled the frame off. And he was standing right here, okay? And as he did that, as soon as it got a little ways up, this tumbled out and landed on his foot and crushed him. Back. Okay, now we're saying to ourselves, whoa, wait a minute. We have offloaded, I don't know how many dozen of these things, and we've never had a problem with them. In fact, some of them were actually bundled inside of this with nylon straps to make sure that they were stable inside. This one wasn't. So how are you going to prevent that from happening? What are you going to do to prevent the incident from occurring? What have you got to do differently? Yeah.
You can inspect to see if they're stable and then all the supports are equal before you lift the top from above them.
Okay, that's excellent, yes.
You could have it back away.
Okay? Okay, those are two really key elements. Another one?
You can call the supplier that gave you them and just kind of try and work out a process so that they can load it so you can unload it easier.
Yeah, and make sure it's stable, right? Okay, so we eliminate the problem at its source, which is the supplier, okay? Then when it comes to the job site, we gotta have somebody that can recognize this kind of thing existing, right? That says, hey, we got a center of gravity here that's over the side of the support. There's potential energy involved, right? Somebody has to look at that frame before anybody does any cutting on it and say, is this stable or is it not stable, right? A new process we have to go through, okay? And then we say, given all of that, we still when we're picking this frame off of there, does the guy have to stand right here on the side? No. We want that guy standing on the end of that thing, right? Where there's no possibility that anything that does come loose that we somehow didn't get with either one of those other processes is not going to hit it. Okay? You see how you go through this? Those are excellent suggestions. And we do the same thing every time, right? And then we get used to saying, you know what? This could be a problem. How about if we set this in place before we have an incident, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So, again, I want to ask, how do you know an appropriate safety culture exists? There's another great big red flag that if it's not happening, ought to be waving around in every project manager's mind. Why is that not happening? What might it be? Yes?
Why, like, near misses aren't being told to you guys?
Yeah. There's no, hey, we're not getting the information flow. Okay? We ought to have a constant flow of ideas on how to make things better, right? On what may not be right. We have a continual improvement that has to be going on. Every relationship of any substantial nature is dependent on it. Not being good enough the way it is, but being actively involved in figuring out what to do differently. And we've got to have those good ideas flowing up through the machine, don't we? Through the relationships, both formal and informal. We want them to come through our chain of command, right? But we also want them to come, if they don't feel comfortable through the chain of command, there has to be enough safety, personal safety. What's going to happen to me? Okay, I report this. We're going to shut down the project. We're going to fix it. Okay, how does that impact me? I got to know that, right? I got to believe it because I talked to my buddy at the water cooler and he told me, this is different here. You're not going to get in trouble. They really appreciate that, right? That's got to happen informally as well as formally. Right? So if that kind of information is not flowing up the chain of command and not coming in, through the open door, okay, you know you haven't got the safety culture that you've got to have. Does that make sense? Okay, remember the quiz on Wednesday? And remember to bring your what, excuse me?
Is it an exam?
It is an exam.
Okay.
Yeah. It is an exam. It will not cover today's lecture, but everything up to but not including today's lecture.
I got 85 on the other two. I mean, if you want to talk to her, go. But the only 85 on, I did in the hours before class because I didn't know.
You were fully.
Do you have our things from the group?
Yeah, so I got 100 on the first one, then 88 on I'm asking for
Well, this is, I had expected, nobody else heard what I expected was that you use that and say, hey, here's a bunch of things that ought to be part of this project. Or go back to that, for example, the protocol that I handed out on what the behavior ought to be of executives.
I completely forgot about it. She didn't email me anything until today, and I was like, shit. I was like,
So to be honest, I thought we had done a fairly comprehensive job of what you were expecting. That's why I'm shocked about like 20%.